gemacht werden mussten. Aber der für mich zuständige Professor Burmeister erzählt mir ganz stolz, gut, das klappt. Es gibt kaum einen Fall, über den so viel gesprochen wurde, aber es hat mir auch gefreut, dass Sie da lange drin waren.
So, hallo, kann man mich hören? Ja, prima, super. Also, so, I want to welcome everybody today here to the Italian Embassy and thank you for Ambassador Varricchio for hosting this very important session today. It's an important day, it's an important weekend, at least for Germany, with the election coming up and hopefully change along the way. Today we have just along our panel discussion, the climate strike outside. We'll have a little discussion about this in a while. And I just wanted to introduce everybody here, and I don't know where the others are that are digitally coming into the discussion. Hi, Eckart. So we have Ambassador Varricchio today. Thanks. We have Ambassador Gallard from the British Embassy here today. We have Dr. Vinke sitting on the other side, who just founded the new Center for Climate and Foreign Policy at the German Council of Foreign Relations. We have Dr. Notz from the Max-Planck-Institut of Meteorology, and we have Dr. Sach, who's on the other side of the screen, who is Director General at the Ministry of the Environment in Germany. And my name is Doreen. I'm going to moderate through the session today. And yeah, I would say let's start, and I will give the mic to Ambassador Varricchio for his opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Embassy of Italy. Thanks to my colleague, Ambassador Gallard, for the partnership, and thanks to the Council of Foreign Relations, the DGAP, for the cooperation. I'm very pleased to co-host this panel discussion, which could be seen as a kickoff for a new row of events and high-level meetings, or a roadmap actually, as we prefer to call it. Youth for Climate and pre-COP26 in Milan, the G20 summit in Rome, and COP26 in Glasgow, all concentrated in a short time between the end of September and the beginning of November. Such meetings will be crucial for the decisions to be taken collectively in 2021, decisions which will shape the next decade of climate action. This is the time to steer the world on the trajectory towards climate neutrality. The stakes could not be higher. As G20 presidency framed by the motto People, Planet and Prosperity, and partnered with the UK for the COP26 presidency, Italy has been working strenuously to ensure the success of the negotiation process through constant diplomatic activity with our European and transatlantic partners. The G20 Energy and Climate Ministerial meetings in Naples in July obtained important results on common priorities, seizing opportunities offered by technological innovation, projects on sustainable cities, and the alignment of global financial flows towards a green and sustainable recovery. It is also particularly meaningful to hold this event today in Germany. German efforts for climate protection and the conversion of civic consciousness towards sustainability have been historically left a deep trace in this negotiation path. And we're very pleased that this topic is so important and they range amongst the priorities of the political campaign. Nevertheless, much remains to be done in order to unlock new and more ambitious climate objectives in view of the Leaders' Summit in Rome and COP26 in Glasgow. We all know that climate change, in a similar way as the pandemic, is a global challenge, an issue that cannot be tackled by any country alone. And this is why we are very pleased to have here a representation of the Diplomatic Corps in Berlin. Thank you very much to my fellow ambassadors for being here today. Therefore, international cooperation, especially multilateral level, will be pivotal to fight against climate change. the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and on this I'm excited to hear the opinion of the expert today, told us that if we do not take this action on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we'll still not be able to limit global warming below 1.5%. And we can see how this is already in action. Extreme weather events that we have also experienced here in Germany over the last summer have been a painful reminder of the current impact of climate change. Italy has therefore decided to put at the core of our recovery and resilience plan to face the aftermath of the pandemic a plan on greener and more inclusive growth model. We are therefore committed to put the EU on track for a 55% reduction in carbon emission by 2030 and net zero emission by 2050. At the same time, we should not overlook that the EU accounts for only 8% of global emissions, and while convincing people and countries worldwide to accelerate on the transition, we should highlight the great benefits in terms of economic growth, health and social improvements arising from a shift to sustainable models. In a few days, several hundreds of young people will gather in Milan and contribute to the discussion on the priorities for climate action, paving the way to the pre-COP discussions. A few weeks later, the G20 summit in Rome and COP26 in Glasgow will represent great opportunities to meet the forward-looking goals of the Paris Agreement mitigation, adaptation, and finance. And I stress finance. Dear guests, dear friends, the common challenge we are facing requires a common response. We are all called to an action which, as recently outlined by Mario Draghi, need to be immediate, rapid, and large scale. Let's work together for our future and begin our roadmap without further delay. Thank you very much, and I wish a net zero by 2050. Do not overlook that only 8% and while convincing people and countries worldwide to accelerate on the transition, we should highlight great benefits in terms of economic growth, health and improvements arising from a shift to sustainable models. In a few people and contribute on the priority action. A few weeks later, the G20 summit in Rome and in Glasgow will represent opportunities to meet the forward-looking goals of the Paris Agreement mitigation, adaptation, and finance. And I stress finance. Dear guests, dear friends, the common challenge we are facing requires a common response. We are all called to an action which, as recently outlined by Mario Draghi, need to be immediate, rapid, and large scale. Let's work together for the future and begin our roadmap without further delay. And I wish you a successful panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Varricchio. And I would now like to call Ambassador Gallard to the mic.
Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, well, thank you, Ambassador, for hosting us today in this beautiful building. And I think the fact that we are here together is symbolic of how closely the UK and Italy have been working together. Today couldn't be a more timely discussion from my point of view. We're going to be seeing big crowds on the streets shortly in the global climate strike and indeed in many other parts of the world. And of course, this week in New York at the UN General Assembly, we've seen world leaders come to commitments. China has committed to ending financing for new coal power projects overseas, and the US has announced it will double really developments. It supports the positive drumbeat that Italy and the UK have been hoping to get going ahead of COP26. Ambassador, you spoke about the upcoming significant milestones Youth for Climate pre-COP in Milan, and of course the G20 leaders at the end of next month. And just as Italy has pressed for progress as G20 president, so we have put climate at the heart of our G7 presidency. And at the Leaders Summit in June, you will all have seen how the leaders committed to some of the targets that the ambassador has spoken about on net zero, on collective emissions, climate finance, coal finance, and protecting the land and the ocean. But we know that there's still a lot further to go. And as hosts of COP26, we're really strongly committed to making a success of Glasgow. So I want to just remind you all what our four... Let's be frank. The developed countries need to deliver on their promise to mobilize $100 billion per year in climate finance for the developing countries. And that's one reason why in the UK, we've announced that we're doubling our climate finance contribution over the next 4 years. We've got to unblock private finance. And the fourth goal, collaboration, of which today I think is a good example. We've got to finalise the Paris rulebook as part of a successful negotiated outcome at Glasgow. And we need to go beyond the negotiations. This is about commitments, but it's also about implementation and action on the ground. And the all-of-society approach that the UK and Italy have put at the heart of this matters so much. We need individuals, we need civil society, as well as government and regulation to play a part. And so we've launched a campaign that we summarise as coal, cash, cars and trees to try and make this real for the individuals. Our Prime Minister is clear that consigning coal to history is a huge challenge, but we really welcome the announcement by China this week as a step in the right direction. On transport, we want to make sure that zero-emission road transport technology gets to a tipping point and is inevitable and accelerating. And so we want a commitment about the sale of new cars and vans being zero-emission by no later than 2035 in leading markets and globally by 2040. What about trees? We're putting forests and land use front and centre by hosting a special leader event at COP26, where we're hoping that leaders will sign up to halt and reverse deforestation and biodiversity loss, underpinned by concrete commitments. So to conclude, I do recognise this is a really long list of big commitments, especially when we think about the fact we're emerging from a global pandemic. But my government is completely committed to hosting an in-person and inclusive COP in November. Coming together in person means we have a much better chance of getting somewhere on all of this. And as my Prime Minister said in New York this week at the UN General Assembly, and I quote, "I hope that COP26 will be a 16th birthday for humanity, in which we choose to grow up, recognise the scale of the challenge we face, do what posterity demands we must, and I invite you in November to celebrate what I hope will be a coming of age and blow out the candles of a world on fire." End of quote. So many thanks to all of you for being here today. Thank you to the Ambassador for hosting us. And I really look forward to hearing from some of our experts on the panel and from all of you. Thank you very much. Grazie.
Thank you, Ambassador Gallard. And from what I know, we're putting in a video now with a special speaker who couldn't be here today, who tried to make it, but we at least have a message from him. It's everybody knows him, the racer, the car racer, formerly in the Formula One. And I would say, let's go for the video.
Hello, dear guests. First of all, many thanks to both of you, Armando Varricchio and Jill Gallard, for this really great and so important initiative. I'm really sorry I can't be there with you today, but I really hope that maybe next time I'll be able to join you in person. Well, we all know it's the 11th hour for the fight against climate change. The racetrack in the heart of Germany called the Nürburgring, where I had some of my greatest successes in my career, this year became a rescue location for all those that were severely affected by the extreme floods in the heart of Germany, where so many people lost their lives, their homes, there was so much suffering. So climate change is really hitting us in the heart of our country now, in the heart of Europe. So it's the 11th hour for us to act now, to try and stop the further deterioration of what's happening out there. The only way for us to achieve change is together, with partnerships exactly like you are showing today. And that's what I really hope that maybe next time I'll be able to join you in person. Well, we all know it's the 11th hour for the fight against climate change. The racetrack in the heart of Germany called the Nürburgring, where I had some of my greatest successes in my career, this year became a rescue location. Those that were severely affected by the extreme flood in the heart of Germany, where so many people lost their lives, their homes, there was so much suffering. So climate change is really hitting us in the heart of our country now, in the heart of Europe. So it's the 11th hour for us to act now, to stop the further deterioration of what's happening out there. The only way for us to achieve change is together, with partnerships exactly like you are showing. And that's what I for COP26. I really hope that there we can form new partnerships, create a new dynamic to accelerate the necessary positive change, and the same comes to the G20 as well. And I know what I'm talking about because I'm a sports person and a sports champion, fortunately. And in sports, to achieve great things, it's impossible to do that alone, just as it is in the real world against climate change. I needed my mechanics, my engineers, my team boss, the organization, everything had to work together and be supportive to have great success. And it's exactly the same in this case. So I really hope and wish that we can come together in this great threat that we're facing. So with this, I wish you a wonderful day, and I hope it's very, very productive, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Nico Rosberg, who's already doing a lot because he's investing a lot in clean tech technologies across the globe, started a lot of initiatives, a lot of partnerships, so this is why he knows what he's talking about. And with this in mind, in terms of what we can do, I would right away go to Dr. Sach. Hard for me to see from here, but Dr. Sach, we heard Ambassador Gallard and Ambassador Varricchio about what they're bringing in or bringing to the table for the G20 negotiation, as well as COP26. What is Germany bringing to the table?
Thank you for the invitation. Were excellently have committed their economy fully and including phasing out our coal-fired power generation. That the COP deliver first on ambition on mitigation means new, more ambitious NDCs for all countries. Second, clear, ambitious long-term strategies, because we need North Star for society on what will be the direction. So I was striving for climate neutrality become the new normal of our societies. And thirdly, the concrete measures. And as Ambassador Gallard looked out, change the energy system, so coal phase out is change the system, zero emission vehicles, key, changing our landscape and protecting biodiversity, so the whole land use sector is key, and climate finance is key. Second point, the Paris Agreement only works if we show international solidarity. Therefore, climate finance is key, and that's why my state secretary is consulting on behalf of the British presidency together with the Canadian minister on how are we able to keeping our promise of delivering at least 100 billion US dollars in climate finance each year. That is key as well. And the third point, let's forget, Paris on one hand is a mechanism which sets out a clear target, empowers civil society, empowers the judiciary, is a catalyst for transformation, but also there are just hard negotiation topics on this technical negotiation agenda. I find it important that we get the details for the transparent reporting right in order to compare efforts throughout the world, that we have robust rules for operation mechanisms, for market mechanisms, and third, that we start really to have a ratchet up mechanism every 5 years and run of the NDCs. So in short, Glasgow for two reasons. First, for having more ambition on mitigation, ambition, and climate finance, but also to finalize the rulebook discussions which still are left over of Paris. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. We heard three representatives between nations completely decarbonized or Ambassador Gallard talked about the new campaign that is in cooperation with Italy, coal for Europe. You talked about having a 2040 and to stay below 1.5 degree that we're aiming.
Also, good morning from me. It's a pleasure to be here. And as a natural scientist, I always have the easiest role in all of that, because the wonderful thing about natural sciences is that you can't negotiate with the scientific negotiate with you. They are just what they are. And to just state the fact that, for example, from a natural sciences point of view, it's very easy to know what we need to reach the 1.5 or keep global warming below 1.5 degrees global warming with a certain likelihood. We can exactly give you the amount of gigatons of CO2 that we emit. And these numbers are relatively fixed. They are nothing we can negotiate with. These numbers are they are nothing that we can negotiate with. Take these numbers and we match them against the claims that are on the table. From a natural sciences point of view, it's not enough to reach the 1.5 degree global warming target. What on the table just now is nothing that the currently cares about, because the climate only sees every single of what has actually been delivered out. Possibly one of the biggest uncertainties that we currently face when it comes to figuring out how warm the climate will be in the end, independent of all the climate on the table just now. And I'm generally a die-hard optimist, but if I look at what we've known for the past 30, 40 society, that we urgently need to take action, and that the longer we wait, there might be a little tendency for some pessimism maybe. But then again, look at the past 2 years and the international movement of and how much that step change the societal awareness of climate change. My impression really this COP could be the tipping point where we finally come from just talking more and more year after year, despite all negotiations, despite all the words.
Thank you, Dr. Dr. Vinke. Or let's put it the other way. Are the hopes too high for COP26? I mean, we've heard the two ambassadors and Dr. Dack with all the ambition.
We have to be very ambitious at this COP. There are members, parties that are not as ambitious. Very scientists across very different just are not enough to keep global warming below 2 degrees, even below 2 degrees. That's enough for the 1.5 target for sure. And the fulfillment of these pledges is also lagging significantly, extremely concerning, and this includes, basically all the countries that are represented here today. And that a coal exit for, we need to have a plan. These are all things to think about in the oil sector. We have to start soon. Those of us who know, who have knowledge, need to share this knowledge. Those of us who have contributed to global emissions, I'm now talking states historically, they need to be the emissions, and they also have the responsibility to finance adaptation in other countries. Measures that I've researched in Burkina Faso. The situation there is devastating for many people. They don't have the ability to this kind of selves. So I think before the COP in Glasgow, we have come to the realization the already. So I talk about Germany now. We have witnessed the flooding in the Eifel. They're supposed to be protected. So I think we are now at a moment in time. Where we can make this happen. We have political will in the population. We can witness today in Berlin and the world, and we have the ability to act. So
thank you very much, Dr. Vinke. Vinke just mentioned we
encouraging.
Right here, parallel to our ideas for future since it started. Why?
I'm one of scientists for future. Fridays for Future was attacked by politicians for not being able to grasp the dimension of things. And then 28,000 scientists from Germany, from Switzerland, and from Austria signed a petition. Youth is right in the point that giving up their future at the moment. And I want to thank Dr. Notz and Dr. Sach and Dr. Vinke for their clear words. I'm a physician, I'm a medical doctor. I studied medicine part-time also in London. And now I work as a TV moderator and a science journalist. And Watzlawick says, if something different. As a doctor, I learned that you have to put the diagnosis first and then talk about the therapy. And this is something that the politicians haven't understood yet, that the majority of people in the countries we are talking about is not yet convinced completely that it's a matter of life and death, and that we're not talking icebergs here, we're talking human beings. So my question to the ambassadors, as I'm an ambassador, as you can see, for the SDG agenda, is how can we convince more politicians to listen to the scientists, and how can we put across the political will from the civil society? My foundation, Gesunde Erde, gesunde Menschen, Healthy Planet, Healthy People, use a lot of medical explanations to win the majority of people to support these measures, because as we've seen in France, when you're just talking about the prices of fossil fuels, you immediately miss the point that people see it as a benefit for their own health, cleaner air. We are living on the only planet with water, with food from plants, and the atmosphere we are talking about is as thin as the skin of an apple. And our senses are not made for assessments. We look into the sky, and as Kira said, we think, well, basically everything is fine. It's not fine. We're really heading for the decisive decade for action. And investors sometimes think the job is done when you signed a paper, but not a single molecule of dioxide has returned since 2015, since the Paris Agreement. Not a single one. We are still emitting more and more. So let's put the medical perspective at the priority, because to my point of view, it's the perspective that most people can agree on. Everybody wants to be healthy. Everybody wants their family and their children to be healthy. And this argument has not been used so far in the climate discussion. And that's why I'm happy to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Well, I refer basically back to the ambassadors. I mean, Dr. Hirsch has, why are we in the middle, you know, on this of the care of politicians? Dr. Notz and also Dr. Vinke said, this is not enough. What we bring to the table, and Dr. Sach as well, you're in the back there, but everybody here, this is not enough. What we bring to the table, and Dr. Sach as well, sorry. What we want to achieve or what we come out with from COP is not enough. How do we change that?
Well, I think that really first allow me to express my appreciation for having here of
Thank you.
On the real issue here. First, to express my appreciation for having we have the West band, so we have Asia, and we have DCM of Slovenia, Europe is representative, and the ambassador of South Africa. So, and this, you know, as an ambassador, of my colleagues to not just represent our national interest, but to promote national understanding. Nothing like climate change that is by definition a global issue. This is a moment when we have a call to set aside for this or something which is clear. You know, being government is a struggle between energy, today problems, events, ahead. This time, the goal is clear. Setting priority. This time, the goal is clear. Science is offering us with a factual analysis of reality. We know what is happening. We put together different interests, international, but also that governments take action, find the regulatory, but also it is important to mobilize individual citizens to real action. This is the goal that we have, and I think that there are no two sides conflicting things. Young people marching in the street are also our sons and daughters. So we feel very much involved here, two conflicting teams. People marching the street are also sons and daughters. So we feel very much involved. And I think that this series of events are not just words or, you know, paper signed. These are important processes that eventually to a greater understanding. In my career, dozens of summits, events, but I have to tell you that the most moving moment for myself was being in Paris when the Paris Accord was signed, looking at the different people that we had an important moment. People that really were thinking that these events that is it enough? I concur. Glasgow are very important. Should not be underestimated at all. It would be a major mistake to underestimate this.
Thank you very much. I think Ambassador Gallard.
Thank you very much. So I said, is the diagnosis easy part. It's what to do about it. That's the difficult. In my introductory remarks, Dr. von Hirschhausen, I quite deliberately said, I know that commitments on paper are one thing, but the key challenge is going to be implementing them. And one reason why we in the UK did these climate civil assemblies was that we hear people from civil society what more our governments needed to do. And I agree with the ambassador. Of course, it's not enough if everyone signs what we not enough. But diplomacy is about progress and step by step. And just like you said, Ambassador, that key moment was being in Paris for you. I just want to share a key moment for me, which was about when I was lucky enough to hear Sir David Attenborough, whom we all consider a British national, to all of our ambassadors in London. And he was asked how he keeps getting out of bed in the morning, you know, that he has spent decades going on about climate change and no one has been listening. And what he said was, in a typical modest way, he said, you know, ocean, he said, it does feel like awareness now, and this has come back to individuals and societies. And he himself said he does feel that there is a key moment here. And if he said to me a year ago, of the UN up this week and say it's code red for humanity on climate change, predicted. Now I might be thinking it's only words, but I see it as a call to him in the camp of some of.
We touched on the civil society action points, maybe, or what we can do within societies. I want to go to Dr. Sach again. As you've been at the International Renewable Energy Agency, and my question to you is, why hasn't there been a massive buildup of globally installed in the last few years? You know, we're all saying we haven't done enough and we need more.
I think I totally concur with Eckart here. You also need to tell a positive story which encourages people to do more. And founding IRENA have a vital, excellent alternative to fossil fuels was quite important. Therefore, my whole career in the last 30 years was firstly to build the consciousness in the constraints we face planet Earth, but also to work constructively on alternatives. And in the beginning, Hermann Scheer and a few people were starting with that. And we had two countries helping us, Denmark and Spain. And now it's a worldwide institution. So it's a big success story. In most places of the world, not in all, renewables are the cheapest source for newly energy structures. And that is without all the important points Eckart mentioned, health costs and other things. So we seem to have not in my backyard problem. And that comes back to the point Eckart mentioned as well, that we need to convince what is in and convince that they can live a better life if we have more renewable energies, because that is key. We're discussing a lot of hydrogen, that is important, but the key source is that we have enough green energy. And therefore, it's rightly a key aspect of all parties to move forward. But let me add one point, the point of optimism. I think we got quite a lot of things right. The foundation of the IPCC. Without the IPCC, it would be impossible to lead the discussion we are leading today. Second, in the last years, we have commitments throughout. We have a Fit for 55 package. I mentioned earlier on, the Constitutional Court is obliging us to do. We have legally binding commitments in Germany for 65% reduction by 2030, and sectorial targets needs to be fulfilled every year. Companies are coming forward with society, municipalities are coming forward. So I would argue the last 5 years, the issue has become an issue for all parties, for all politicians, and not climate ministers. For ambassadors, has been a lot of the speed we need, but I think we are in the process, and thanks to Fridays for Future, positive support.
Thank you, Dr. Sach. You raised an important point there, is the awareness of civil society of people to, push for renewables and to also themselves reducing their CO2 level now. I personally, I've built up the German Renewable Policy with Klaus Töpfer, so all about it. My question is, or my opinion is that the awareness is there. So people do support the renewable regulatory framework for that. But I want to refer to Dr. Hirschhausen again. You have, I would say, civil societies also with your organization, Healthy People, Healthy Planet. Where do you see what needs to be done in order to either raise more awareness in civil society, know that climate is their health, or really understand in order to get the leverage to save even more CO2?
I would like to follow the British ambassador mentioning David Attenborough. My key interview that I did as a journalist was with another British and asking me a very dire question that I want to pose to all the important decision makers in the room and online. Jane is a researcher on apes, on chimpanzees, and she asked, was 85 years at the time, when we human beings always stress the point that we are the most intelligent creature ever to walk on planet Earth, why are we destroying our own home? The basic question for the 21st century. And another great British invention is the Lancet Climate Counter. One of the most prestigious medical journals has put climate change crisis as their top priority with Richard Horton and Nick Watts and other very important physicians. And they're saying climate change is the biggest threat to human health in the 21st century. And I think that the co-benefits have to be stressed, have to be levered with inaction. Renewables, there are serious estimations that you only need 1% of the global income to completely put the world on 100% renewables. And we're talking about money, we're talking about budgets, we're talking about power in this. And renewables are one of the big changes, of health, because 8.8 billion people die each million people die each year of air pollution. It's the biggest cause of global health. We're not talking about this. This is mainly fossil fuels burning that are destroying the atmosphere and our lungs at the same time. This is a problem for engineers, a problem for our health. And this is a game changer in communication. And you can ask people directly, well, where do you want to live? Next to a solar panel or next to a nuclear station when something goes wrong. So the point is the renewable energy leads to better through better air. When we turn around the mobility sector, when people are using their bike, they do in Copenhagen, they have less dementia, less overweight, less heart, less stroke. When you're talking about nutrition, we could have a big party when we have a big barbecue with all the unnecessary animals on this planet. Each one of us, there are 400 animals just fed to be killed afterwards to be eaten. And this is our planetary health. So barbecue and have a planetary health diet, plant-based diet afterwards. And these are the big for our own health. And this is an argument in Glasgow. And I hope to see many people convinced it's not the climate that we have to save, it's us. Mother Earth doesn't care about human beings. Earth has existed without us for millions of years, very happily. If we want to survive on this Earth, we have to read the laws of science. And they, as Dr. Notz said, physics apply, as Dr. Notz said, physics apply even if people don't understand them.
Thank you. While I can't see at the COP them discussing a vegetarian regulatory framework, maybe my question to Dr. Vinke, why isn't the or like other countries going, but not like on a massive scale? Outside of China, but that's I don't know if I'm gonna save anything.
Not the right person to answer this, because I'm obviously an avid supporter of an early coal phase out, so I'm also asking myself why this has not happened so far. But of course there are vested interest in the continuation of usage of fossil fuels, be it coal, be it oil, be it gas, and let's not fool ourselves. These vested interests are also represented in governments who are taking part in the COP. Personal investment in coal are part of governments, are partaking. This is a very difficult question to solve, and I think in Germany we have to also realize that our negotiating position with the people here are working in, we are asking them to look at us. Well, 2038, it's quite a while away. How are you now?
Government, but yeah, depends on who's coming into the German government. So. Yeah.
So at home will help us to also be better positioned abroad when we ask for countries. So I think this is something we have to if we have partners like Italy, UK, who are ambitious, this also helps us to justify this at home. So I think this issue of forming partnerships, forming alliances, maybe also unusual alliances, is key to solve this issue.
Do you think, a follow-up question, do you think our position or Germany's position has weakened for the COP with a federal court decision that the government didn't do enough in terms of climate policies to fulfill the Paris Agreement.
As here, so they should guide our. So I think their interpretation is to force saying that the freedom touched upon, and this, I mean, this is the main finding. But what I find very interesting is that see the lower bound of the
on the 1.5 degrees. If we don't achieve that goal, if you know at the COP6 we don't come up, what's going to happen?
Yeah, that's no. Change is that that's the climate warmer. That's basic physics. And each bit we make the climate warmer, we move it away from the extremely stable climate that we've had for the past 10,000 years. And I think that would be one of the facts I would like every single person on this planet to be aware of, that the anti-evolution of stone stable climate for 10,000 years. And we are now in the process of ending this climate. We are now moving out of this comfort zone, civilization development, and we are bringing the climate into not familiar at all. The temperatures we have in the last decade are as warm as they've last been 100,000 and more years ago. So we increase fast, change system infrastructure to this new climate state. If we don't achieve the 1.5 degree global warming target, we are just moving from the one that our system is adapted to, and we are just making the problem for future generations the large every single. We'll increase the total sea level. We'll increase the number of extreme events, of floodings. We'll increase the number of heat and fatalities from those. We'll just make it the more harder, the longer wait, and the less action we take. Again, that's unfortunately very, very basic physics. Thank you.
Are we having too much expectation will come out of it that impact on people? Or
I fully support the Paris Agreement, and I think it's a huge movement to have reached this agreement. I'm not doubting that the important role. But I also think that politicians, due to the short cycle of their re-elections, have not yet been able to grasp topics that have a longer time period. This is a brain also very difficult to grasp. And talking about the brain, I remember being invited to the Italian embassy to, and it was on a hot summer day. It was to talk, because the brain is the most organ that we have to temperature. We have to keep a cool head, and the brain is made out of proteins disintegrate at 42 degrees. The limits, and this is one thing that I want to stress, that we think science and biology are negotiable. They are not. And the cost of inaction that we are facing today has to be put into perspective of how much unimaginable damage will be done. And the CO2 pricing instrument is away from the relevant sector of cost that a ton of CO2 is doing damage to. And your question, how many experts we put onto this gathering, I would like to stress that there are 3 generations now ready for change. There are parents for future, there are grandparents for future, scientists for future. I'm part with Planet Healthy People of F20, a great network of foundations. So we need to get away from the conflict of young against old. We need to get away from the conflict of young against old, of rich against poor on this, and nobody can buy his own CO2 level, nobody can buy their own external temperature, nobody can buy his own air. So COVID-19 has shown how vulnerable we are, and that global threats can be put from one place to the other in 48 hours. So the rich countries have to get an understanding of this. So the rich countries have to get an understanding of climate crisis being integrated with the pandemic preparedness and with the biodiversity crisis, and these 3 crises belong to, and this is, to me, also a game changer. We can use this COVID-19 crisis as the last resort, the last moment that we have to wake up, that if we want to continue, we have to crisis context and address them simultaneously. It's a big challenge, as the other speakers still hopeful, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Ambassador Gallard.
If I could just strongly support that.
Ambassador.
Just strongly support Italy this summit because of COVID. I think we've turned that to our advantage. Let's be frank, it's an extra year and decades, and we are very role of influence, convene and to get people together. But I don't think we're very ambitious targets, because one thing we've learned in diplomacy is not ambitious, and what you do achieve is less than if you were ambitious.
G7 20 meetings, I think you've been a shepherd. Dr. Notz and Dr. At those that you are, yeah, what is at stake basically, or do you have the feeling it's understood?
Well, all targets have been achieved. This does not mean that, as my British colleagues describe, we should continue setting ambitious targets. It's the best way to continue to onboard even new projects. The world is changing. We should not fool ourselves. Challenging, but on this we can really have the opportunity to find a common ground. This is what diplomacy is all about, taking into account different point of views and differences, but try to, and certainly by definition a common goal. We should be able to decide, all our leaders will meet happen after the in Rome. They should be able to set aside all the differences of a number of issues. As important as definition international, I would say, even to use a technical expression, business companies with countries, civil society, so by definition, it's important that our will focus on common struggle. We are encouraging them, and the more we are able to raise our voice and to raise awareness, is working all together there too, but probably young people in the streets have in mind of what they see. Science, business too, because not be results and involved. Business is not the enemy. Business is one, so we should be all of this together. And of course, having different point of views, but it is up to the leaders able to come up with views and come up more to the boss.
Your hand, but okay, go ahead.
I just want to have one more topic discussed, because the art of diplomacy is basically to in peace. Vinke is one of the international experts on the connection between climate crisis and migration and war. And my grandparents, they had many of the wars that we see today are directly linked to fossil fuel, to the loss of land where people can live, and it's just the beginning of this century. And I'm really worried that the great privilege that my generation had to live in a peaceful Europe, and in a world where the amount of conflict has basically went down, is witnessing a rise of armed conflict that will kill people in the and temperature that are bearable to human beings. I would love to have to put this into scientific discussion as well.
How much the rise of conflict, war, is not.
Yeah, there's now a very growing body of evidence that suggests that there is conflict. Of course, conflict usually drives the clouds and the genesis of conflict. Of course, conflict has many reasons. That's usually not just what we are seeing, that if people, for example, because they lose, if they're herders, the culture, that this makes them very vulnerable, for example, to be recruited by terrorist groups. It makes them vulnerable of population that lines. So these are things that we are already witnessing around 1.1 degree global mean temperature rise. And this means also more an adaptation, because we know that we will reach the 1.5 temperature mark if we reduce emissions now. More droughts, we will have more floods. We can still avoid the worst of impact, but nevertheless, we have to ramp up our adaptation efforts. And we have to do it now. We cannot wait for these to materialize. And here we come back to the parallel COVID-19 pandemic, and because we learned from this. We have seen that if we wait to act with infection mitigation measures, for example, basically too late. We have to use science to act very early before the risks are visible. And organization, we have this available in the health field, it's epidemiological models, in the climate field, it's climate science, to be able to anticipate risks. This was not possible 100 years ago. So we have this great advancement that we can actually act. Then, that if we don't act, even in very modern countries, our systems and these two crises, we see that there's change. When we are very, it's very difficult for us to react to nonlinear change. For example, exponentially infection rates. On early, we have no to save the amount of lives that we could have if we had acted early. The other realization is that everyone counts. What everybody does counts. Everybody has to, and this is true for the pandemic, where we had to limit our interaction. More true for the. So I want to encourage. Let's not wait until the call. Let's save the world today.
It's almost a good ending statement, Kira. On that. Yes, everybody has to do something, and let's start saving the world. We have to take, because it's our oil and coal fields or whatever, not putting that money in. We not, we can't ask the children
IEA and ARENA figures clearly show that most of the new energy investment is directed towards renewable energies. So the fossils are on the declining path, not quickly enough, I agree with you, but that's just the facts. Well, and China, with its just put out this week actually, is wanting to build 70 gigawatts of solar by 2023. Why? Change? No, it's a argument which Eckart put forward first. It's about a five-year future. Dirk Notz spoke about tipping points. I want to just, when we do destabilize our Earth system, and I agree with all what I heard here. But I think we might be just in the movement towards a very positive tipping point. It is German steel companies, international steel companies, cement companies, big chemical companies, they're all pledging to become neutral, because that is seen to be the normal. And therefore, that's there, but there's still inertia, there's interest from those companies who are responsible for the development of the planet, and they're having difficulties. But having said that, RWE, or how, when it's not power plants, they are shifting rapidly in their business fields as well. Therefore, implementation is key. Let me slightly disagree with one sentence from Eckart, because that's one I'm always a little bit puzzled. You said politicians, but yet. I think we have to understand that both society and politicians are a very diverse mix of people. And therefore, politicians react to opinions in society and vice versa. Yes, you're right, we need more leadership from politicians in order to really during the future in a precautionary way, but it's there. Last point, how to make climate change even more climate change policies, or renewables even more attractive. I agree with you, Eckart, pricing is key, because you tax bads, but also that you have income which you can redistribute to help the social poor. You can spur innovation, and you can just build transformation, as we have just seen in the flooding crisis.
Of humanity. Who? What is? I don't know. I would take Dr.
At the tool, and they climate policy in place that is aligned with the Paris Agreement, which is the Gambia.
All right, everybody comes. Ambassador Varricchio.
You know, I think that let's look at Gambia as a positive result. That's why I'm particularly pleased to have the ambassador of South Africa, because South Africa as a continent is what we have in mind is tremendously important. But I think this is a call to action for everybody. And certainly we have to be aware that our democracies have a special responsibility. Have a special responsibility. Because call not just to set political objectives, but also to set values that for us are important. And today, protecting Mother Earth is a value, not just that should be considered important to define what we are as a democratic countries. So that's our leaders and eventually in Glasgow will have to steer the process. So that's why the more we are able to work together, the better it is. A positive and shining example is fully followed by others.
Yeah.
100 countries involved. I love the Gambia example, and I'm really heartened by that. But I do want to call out 3 examples of things to celebrate. And the first is, you know, this week, the new US commitment. Imagined that a year ago? We've seen the new China. Would we have imagined that a year ago? No. And I hope you forgive a British ambassador for celebrating something about what he has done. I'm not saying we're a role model, but I'm really proud that for the first time last year, we had a larger amount of energy from renewable sources than by fossil sources. And so I do think that's something to celebrate. Thank you.
Good.
Climate change can only be solved by all of us together. I'm also very hesitant to single out an individual country, but I would like instead to single out an individual generation, namely the young people. I think they really, really have understood, and I think many of the other generations.
Dr. Sachs?
It's an issue for all nations, United Nations, United Peoples, and therefore I would call to take the re-energized United Nations Guterres to be a key aspect, because only through United Nations we can reach beyond G20 or G7 activities and have a focus on helping the poor in this transition.
Eckart?
COVID-19, a virus doesn't need a visa to cross a country. It doesn't ask if you're a human being or an animal. It doesn't ask if you have a health insurance or not. And on the same ticket, a CO2 molecule in the atmosphere doesn't ask where it came from. It just follows its physical environment. And so I don't want to single out a country, rather to applaud everyone putting this in his or her personal priority first level. And we will be asked, each one of the ambassadors in the room will be asked children by their grandchildren. And I have a little symbol here, zum Lachen, to be healthy and born to love. Every child today will be affected by climate crisis. This is what the Lancet Climate Countdown says very clearly. We will be asked by our children, what did you know 2021? What did you do? And what was your personal action on mitigating this crisis? And I hope for all of us that we'll have good answers. And as Dr. Notz said, it's a generational task, and it's a thing of justice, of global justice. And I hope we all have good answers when we will be asked 20 can be really the social tipping point, historical turnaround. And thank you for everyone working on this together.
Thanks, Eckart. Deserves a deep respect for starting the movement, by the way. About the young generation, I think when we talk about the young generation, I think she is definitely worth mentioning. To our guests here at the embassy, has a question, please raise your hand. I'm happy to come in with a mic. Do you want a mic?
Lot on carbon offsetting. The situation is not very strategy.
Sure, if we want to hear this discussion. Okay, I did. Yeah, Dr. Sachs.
Thank you. Offsetting can be an important point to drive ambition, but it must not be. Absolutely right. There is a jungle of systems, some of them very good, some of it limits, and therefore it's important that we get one robust international system, so-called Article 6 under the Paris Agreement, that companies can trust that the system we're working with is one which has transparent rules, and therefore an important issue for the agenda in Glasgow.
I may add, notice in Germany at least say that setting kind of but we have to Kämpfer, and I'm sure you actually go negative on the zero emissions and not just like zero. So this technology stepping time. But maybe you want to add something.
Yeah, I think for me the easiest image of carbon offsetting is that street and then the corner and pick up somebody else's garbage. And a better thing, of course, would be to just pick up somebody else's garbage and not throw my own garbage on the street. And however, there are certain amounts of greenhouse gas emissions that we'll never be able to avoid, and those will eventually need to be offset. Physics again. Minimum possible of reducible of greenhouse gas emissions, but we all want to invest into taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. But it's not either or. We need to go to the maximum possible in both regards if we were to be successful on the 1.5 degree global warming target. So the offsetting is not instead of, but it's just in addition to really, improving and increasing efforts.
Thank you so much. Any other?
Very much for this live. Jennifer Tillman from E3G. Two questions. One, we're going to see world leaders assemble at the beginning of COP26. What are they going to do to accelerate action out of COP26 when we already know that the stock taking is going to show so many gaps? What is the political agreement at COP that takes us further, that builds confidence in more action? Second question, probably related. One of the things that we haven't touched on as much in today's panel is infrastructure investment. The German phase out is estimated to be costing 80 billion euros. When we talk about barriers to coal phase out the world in countries like South Africa, Asia, like Vietnam, where is the money going to come from? We've seen initiatives emerge, but what are the both from the UK, Italy, and actually think
what's say Sach?
Yes, on the just remind all of us on the priorities which Ambassador Gallard put forward. Therefore, a clear political message of leaders with concrete action initiatives for decarbonizing the energy sector, the transport sector, on finance and on ecosystem, forests, I think is what I would like to see the cover decision of. Moreover, strong as possible statement towards our compass, 1.5 important, but we know that some countries don't accept that. And so therefore, it's an important role for the G20 summit as well. On the second question, Jennifer, you're absolutely right. Not things can be negotiated in Glasgow. It is important that the IMF and World Bank discussions, we set the direction towards just having the capital for the investment needed for the future, in particular for countries in the global south. And there is a very vivid discussion on special drawing rights. It is important on how that, and therefore it's an important role also for future G7 and G presidencies, and probably it will land on Germany's desk next. I'm pretty sure for that one, and I'm thankful for the G20 presidency this year that she highlights that aspect in deliberations as well.
The German Federation, very thankful because they show concrete instruments and action. So first of all, to allow me, we all here agree on the fact that we need to act and why climate change is important. Let's now come to a point where we concrete actions. We are already at a second stage of the discussion in Germany. We have a dynamic on the road. We have renewed. So now let's ask, what do you want? 26. So what do you want to change now? What is your strategy to difference than all 25 COPs before?
Thank you. So it's, I think, who said it? Let's walk the talk. The other day. So maybe you have an answer to the.
I could go first, and then of course Italy, our co-partner. But just to say, you know, this is precisely why we've tried to make COP26 feel a bit different. Governments and saying this must be done. And that's why climate finance is such a big part of 26. It's individuals, it's civil society, governments, and to your point about regulation, it's got to be a mix of all those things. If there were a silver bullet or a magic wand, we'd all go, as Professor said, the diagnosis. So it's the above is my sense.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything, Ambassador Varricchio?
Finance is absolutely crucial to mobilize resources to finance projects. Structures have been made. Infrastructures are crucial to promote what we want to do. To meet not just economic goals, but also to make sure that local communities can grasp the benefits to avoid, as it has been reminded, mass migrations, to avoid disturbances. I think it is important. This is actually transformed into, and certainly they have a special responsibility, but they have to be able to as resources of the German Association of Industry. It's part of the solution.
It's also about 25 COPs already. Nothing really changed, right? Would make different. Like, how can we get this COP to really push measures, talks?
Wait this time, and I follow up on the comment that has been made. COVID has been a tremendous wake-up call for all of us. So in a way, gas that not only do we have to respond to events, their engagement to promote, to make nations there is now a great awareness. So Glasgow is not a number in a sequence. It would be a major mistake to focus on the number. It is a moment when there is a much international awareness, and we should try to move there.
Good to hear that, and Britain is on the same page. Dr. Vinke, is everybody on the same page?
I think we have already also touches upon the on which Germany is taking the presidency next year, and we have a lot of representatives from the G7. They agreed to subsidies. It's really happened. I think we also kind of asked for this accountability, prior commitments, and I think this is that can be that would also show financial flows in the end. And then the other thing is that we have, as you have mentioned, we're coming out of a pandemic, and recovery package in Europe next year, and we have agreed to invest a substantial amount to green recovery, but so far not the amount that was agreed, which was 30% or something like this, into these green projects. So why is that not happening, and how can we enforce basically more? I think these are the questions. It's not only about setting more ambitious targets necessary to do so, but also not only about setting more ambitious targets necessary to do so, but also what are we doing in the next year, in the next 20 months?
I agree, and again, it's another panel discussion where the money flows from the green. I think we could talk at hours at that point. So one last question, and if not, everybody that took part. Thank you, Dr. Sach. Let me say anything. That took part. Thank you, Dr. Sach. Let me say anything. But maybe.
No, when you're leaving the room, you all go to the global climate strike.
Oh yeah, that's right, right outside.
And be part of the change.